Welcome, everyone. We are so glad you are here with us this evening. My name is Miriam Kadosh, and I'm the Director of Education and Patient Engagement at the Melanoma Research Foundation. We are pleased to have you join us today for this wonderful educational opportunity entitled Melanoma in the Hispanic Population. Tonight's program is to recognize Hispanic Heritage Month. The goal today is to discuss how melanoma presents in this population, treatment options, common things to look out for, and more. Our mission at the MRF is to eradicate melanoma by accelerating research while educating to and advocating for the melanoma community. We know that education is critical for patients to make informed decisions about their care. We are very grateful for ISI for their generous support of this webinar series and investment in the MRF's mission. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. We encourage you to use the Q&A box to ask questions throughout the session. The information presented during today's session is for educational purposes, and any individual treatment questions should be directed to your healthcare provider. We encourage everyone to visit melanoma.org to learn more about the resources we have available. Also, this session will be available for viewing later as part of our videos on demand library that you can share with others. Okay, today we are joined by Dr. Correa Selm and Jose Gonzalez. Dr. Correa Selm is a U.S. board-certified dermatologist and internist, international dermatologist, fellowship-trained Mohs micrographic surgeon, and expert confocalist. Prior to being at USF Moffitt, she was the director of cutaneous surgery at Cleveland Clinic Indian River Hospital, while also teaching as an assistant professor at FSU. Before moving to Florida, she completed a fellowship in Mohs micrographic surgery in New Jersey after completing her dermatology residency at Rutgers, Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. Additionally, she also accomplished a confocal microscopy fellowship and laser cosmetic research fellowship. She also performed research at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, completed her internal medicine residency at Cornell New York Downtown Hospital, and performed research at Harvard's renowned Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston, following spending 1 year as a physician in a remote underserved area of South America. She is a published author of numerous book chapters in dermatology, as well as articles in important medical journals. And we are so lucky to have her here with us this evening. Dr. Correa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Miriam. I'm very thankful to the Melanoma Research Foundation for this great initiative, especially on the month of Hispanic Heritage. So as you all know, I'm going to give you a little bit snippet of how is melanoma on the Hispanic population, a little bit of data of why melanoma is the way it is in our population, and what to do to try to overcome some of the challenges that we may have. So I'm going to pull up right now my presentation so we can start watching it. Can you see my screen, Miriam?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. So we probably are familiarized with what is a melanoma. So melanoma is a type of skin cancer. I would say one of the most aggressive ones of the types we know. And it does happen when the cells that produce the pigment in the skin, called melanocytes, start growing out of control, and they start going out of the boundaries that they were supposed to do. And obviously, they don't only grow locally in the skin, but they can also travel to other organs out of the skin. So in the past 2 decades, melanoma has increased by 20% among Hispanics. The current melanoma incidence is 28.8 per 100,000 annually in the US population. That includes all race and all skin phototypes. But in Hispanics in particular, was 4.9 per 100,000. So as you can see, the incidence is not as high as in the rest of the population. But then because of that, we don't tend to think that Hispanics can suffer from melanoma. And that is why Hispanics are more likely to be diagnosed with later stage melanomas as well as thicker melanomas. So there, as we all know, there is a bias in that sense because of the reason that we don't think that this is a cancer that can be suffered by Hispanic population. Hence, the mortality rates in Hispanics is around 0.6 per 100,000. And this was for data between 2015 and 2019. So following that same data, as we can see, Caucasians present with 25% thicker tumors versus Hispanics that present with much higher, 35%. And then by the time that the cancer presents or that the cancer is diagnosed in the Hispanic population, 12% of them have regional involvement versus only 8% in the Caucasian population. So it's a much more aggressive tumor that has already traveled inside the body. So the patients, the cancer rates in Hispanics versus non-Hispanics, whites, we can see here, there's 1 in 172 for Hispanics versus 1 in 38 for whites. So again, much more prevalent in white non-Hispanics, right? And that is the reason why we have this bias. But 2.4 times is more likely to present with advanced disease in Hispanics, stage 3, and then 3.84 times more likely to spread to other parts of the body because it's already an aggressive tumor. Now, the overall median age at melanoma diagnosis for the Hispanic population is 56, so medium age. In females is 52, and in males is 61, so a little bit older. And the age-adjusted incidence for melanoma in females is 4.6 per 100,000 versus 4 for females, 4 per 100,000 individuals. And we don't quite know exactly why, but we tend to think that the females are a little bit more prone to check themselves than males. So the males kind of like let it go a little bit more. So despite a recent overall improvement in melanoma mortality in general population, there are still racial disparities in melanoma-specific survival for Hispanics. And it has a continuous and increased disparity throughout the years. So why do we think is that? So there is a lower index of suspicions because of the misconception about melanoma risk in Hispanics. Since it's less common, then that's why we don't tend to think that it's a cancer that can present in this population. There is also limited skin cancer education, so lower rate of self and physician skin exams. So we don't tend to educate our population. We don't take to educate Hispanics patients on this, so they don't know that they should do it. There's also a typical clinical presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about it. So they don't present like the usual melanoma. So then people or physicians or even patients do not think that is something that is dangerous. And by the time they consult, it's already big. There is also increased socioeconomic barriers. So there is a decreased access to dermatologists and oncologists. And the common types of melanoma in Hispanics can also be more aggressive per se. So it's not only that we are capturing them late, but they're also more aggressive per se. Like they tend to grow faster than the regular melanoma in non-Hispanics. So what is the clinical presentation in Hispanic patients? So the most common site in general for all the Hispanic population are legs and hips. Now, if we separate females and males, in females is, again, legs and hips, but in males is trunk. So if we think about it, back. So, and we usually joke that because they don't tend to look at their back as often, so that's why. Then dark brown, or they usually present as a dark brown or black macule. And in Hispanic patient, they usually don't follow the ABCD of melanoma. So I just a brief reminder, ABCD, A is for asymmetry, B is for borders, C is for colors, and D for diameter. So they are, for example, if we see here the one on the right lower corner, it's all black, right? It's only one color. So then, oh, well, usually to be a melanoma, it has to be 3 or more colors. Hence, this is probably not a melanoma. Well, guess what? It is a melanoma. So they defy those rules, and that's why people tend to overlook at them. Always, we should recommend to check feet and palms, because they are very common areas where Hispanics can present melanoma, as well as the oral mucosa, the mouth, inside the mouth, okay? And also another place to think about is under the nails, or either in the base of the nail or under the nails. And as you can see, all the pictures that we have here are pictures of melanoma that are presented on the nails. Then Hispanics also have high rates of head, neck, and mucosal melanomas compared to all other racial and ethnic groups, like we can see here. So, for example, behind the ear, right? Nobody would see it unless that lesion start to like bleed, right? Which is already a little bit advanced. Or the mouth. We don't tend to check our mouth as common, right? So, but it happens to be that in Hispanics population, mucosal melanoma, it is common. So what are the recommendations we should give to our Hispanic patients? So avoid the use of tanning beds. And it's so surprising to me that a lot of my patients, until they come to me, they have no idea. They're like, oh, we're going to go to prom, so the next thing to do is to get a tanning bed, right? So we should avoid that at all costs, because that alone increases the risk of melanoma. So when you're walking outside, seek shade whenever possible. Like if you have 2 sidewalks to walk, just pick the one that is on the shade. Wear a wide brim hat that covers your ears and the back of the neck. So that's very, very important. So for example, a baseball hat wouldn't do that, right? So in females, I'm not as concerned, because female patients will have the hair to cover their ears and the back of the neck. But in my patients that are males, they don't have that luxury, right? And that's why I end up cutting a lot of melanomas in the ears and in the back of the neck. Use sun protecting clothing. So this is very easy, for example, for patients that swim or that are out playing golf or tennis, right? Because they're not going to stop the game to just go and apply, right? Versus just wearing the protective clothing like long sleeves, pants, and then they don't have to think about it. They're just already protected. Obviously, apply sunscreen of at least SPF 30, reapply every 2 hours or after profusely heating or swimming. That's why sometimes it's not as practical. And that's why I say, well, if that's not conducive, then just try to consider protective clothing. And then perform monthly self-esteem exam, okay, with a special attention to mouth, genitalia, hands, and feet. So ideally, I tell my patients not more than once a month, because then you're going to get very overwhelmed. And then as far as going to check with your physician, the follow-up, it's going to depend on your history and how many skin cancers you've had through your life or family history. So that's why I didn't include here, because that varies anywhere from a year to every 3 months. But obviously, if there is a spot that you're concerned about, then you should seek help from a dermatologist. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Correa. We'll save some questions for you at the end. But we will move on to our next speaker. Next, we have Jose, who will share his story with us this evening. Jose Gonzalez has lived in the United States for 28 years. He loves the ocean, but admits that he maybe spent too much time close to it and not enough time using any type of sun protection. Jose ended up with melanoma and was diagnosed over 10 years ago. He hopes we can create awareness among the Hispanic population about this type of cancer. He also adds that anyone can have melanoma regardless of their ethnicity or skin color, so it is just as important to spread awareness to all. Jose, I'm going to turn it over to you to share your story. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, I spent too much when I was younger. A lot of younger. I spent too much time on the beach, on the coast, and taking sun, you name it. I got burned twice on my body, like 2nd degree. I don't know if you, well, you know, it's kind of like that. It was bad. And nothing happened. I just kept on going. And now, 10 years ago, I got that stain on my neck. And my wife told me, why don't you, go to the doctor and take a look at it? I really didn't care at that moment. No? And then they told me, no, you have melanoma. So then I came back and told my wife, okay, I start checking it out, browsing. Wow, I'm dead. I'm pretty much dead. So I told my wife, okay, I have 2 credit cards. Let's travel now. Let's wait. At the end, I don't have to pay them. So what the heck? Wife told me, no, calm down, relax. Let's see what's going on, what happens, all that. So we went to the doctor and they got the surgery. They got me, and I mean, that's it. That pretty much was it. I kept, going to the doctor every 3 months. Then after 6 months, during all these years, I got one moss. I need your help. Something in my nose here, Dr. Correa. I need your help in here.
Mohs surgery.
Yeah, there you go. See, I hear my nose about and I got one on my ear also. And I mean, no melanoma, but another type, squamous cell chinos. Okay, my wife here got my assistant. So anyway, and that's it. But I'm here, so that's it. I don't know if you want ask me some questions or go ahead. Feel
Yeah.
free.
Thanks, Jose. And yeah, anyone on the audience, feel free to write in some questions that you have for either of our speakers. But Jose, I want to ask you, you talked a little bit to me about your experience after your melanoma diagnosis, about sharing with others the importance of getting your skin checked and checking yourself.
Oh yes. Every time I find somebody, hey, why don't you, do this and that, and I explain that person, if he wants to listen, of course, my story short version, and they kind of look at me like, okay, sometimes, but yeah, I try to just tell people, I say, oh, it's not worth it, so.
Before your diagnosis, Jose, did you know anything about melanoma or sun protection in general?
Yeah, I heard about it, yes, but didn't care pretty much, that much.
What would you tell your younger self?
Come on, man, just wear some sunscreens, some hat, but yeah, sunscreen. I mean, at that time, I didn't have sunscreen to begin with. I was in Cuba, they didn't have that. So pretty much I didn't use anything. So, but here, I mean, you got everything. So it's not expensive. So you can use some nice hat, cool. Yeah.
Thank you. I think, Dr. Correa, you made a great point about the lack of awareness in this community because of many factors. But what would you say is an important thing for people in this community to know? And how can they protect themselves and share the awareness with people in their community?
So I think the most important thing is to be aware that melanoma can happen in the Hispanic population. So not because we're Hispanics, we're not going to suffer from it, okay? Or because we're a little bit dark, we're never going to suffer from melanoma. So yes, we have a little bit protection, but not enough to say we're not going to suffer from melanoma in my life. So we have to still be careful and be mindful that this is a disease, or this is a condition that can happen in the Hispanic population. And more importantly, because of that, we have to take precautions, like Jose said. So wear your sunblock, wear some protective clothing, wear a nice hat that covers your ears and the back of your neck, seek shade, try to avoid the strongest sun between 10 and 3, which is the one that's going to harm the most. So I think even though being Hispanics, we all should follow these recommendations.
Jose, do you have anything to add there?
Oh, no, not pretty much. No. Thank you, Correa, that, she's my new doctor now. I used to have one in Houston. I used to live in Houston, Texas. So I have all that problem over there. So I got my surgery over there. And now I came here and I got Correa, and I'm glad she's the one. So.
Especially in Florida, we see people just hanging out all over the beach and spending a lot of time outside all year round. That's
Yes.
of course a risk.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, all year round. Yeah, in Houston, Texas, I mean summertime, okay, but now in December, nah, not much. But here, it's all year long. It's no. It's same season. It's like yeah.
Yeah. So especially people in those states that have sunshine all year round, Dr. Correa, what would you suggest to those folks?
So I would suggest that even on the a little bit chillier months, which I mean, we don't have winter here, like Jose said. So it's really not cold. Like it's maybe 70s, 60s, at least in Tampa. And in some areas in Florida, doesn't even get that low. So I would say even in the chillier or cooler month, you still have to be protected because you still can get burned, even if it doesn't feel like it, which is the same for like when it's overcast or raining. The clouds do not filter the rays, the sunlight as well, so we still can get burned even in an overcast day. So we have to still be careful, even though it's not a sunny day out or it's not a very warm day out.
Absolutely. Oh, we're getting a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to read them. What are some, and either of you can answer, what are some good ways to help raise awareness and educate the Hispanic population, other than webinars like this? What are some ways that we can get the word out that this is an important for them as well?
Ladies, Correa,
Yeah, so I think so. Number one, obviously, this is a really good initiative from the Melanoma Research Foundation because we can show numbers, right? So people see the numbers and they're like, oh my God, we can actually suffer from this, right? So we're actually giving them some tangible information about this type of tumor, right? So things that I have done in general. So I have, for example, go to Hispanic communities to give them these type of talks, like church, community groups. So they have asked me, can you please give the talks? And more importantly, are given in Spanish, because I think that's one of the biggest bias we have. So not everybody is as fluent as Jose, right? That can understand and speak in English, right? So I have a fair amount of patients that don't speak English at all. Not even that they speak a little bit, they don't speak it at all. So I try as much as possible, if there is a huge if there's a considerably number of Hispanic speakers, I try to give it in their own language so they don't understand what I'm talking about, the things that they should do, the precautions that they should take, right? And try to talk in their same cultural and try to incorporate that into their activities. So, okay, so you do this, you do that. So how can you incorporate all the sun safety activities to their daily life? I have given also talks, for example, to farmers, right? So in that case, it was a company actually through the Melanoma Research Foundation too, and it was given in Spanish to specific farmers that were on the field. So I adapted that talk to them and say, listen, when you do this, this is what you have to do, right? So I think we have to bring all this awareness to the actual populations that need us, right? In different ways. And then obviously, if we get resources, ideally through social media and TV, right? Try to do commercials through the Melanoma Research Foundation, with the AED, and say, listen, melanoma, something can happen in Hispanics, please protect yourself, right? So try to, again, bring all the information to the houses of the Hispanic population.
Yeah, absolutely. We like to call it meet them where they're at. And that's exactly what you're doing. Another idea that I had was going into schools and talking about sun safety. So that's something that we are definitely working on, especially for the Hispanic community and more rural communities as well. Maybe they don't have as much access to awareness. So that's really great, and some great ideas.
That's good. Yeah, schools. Yeah, and if you can find any celebrity, any singer that can go with you, well, that's better, way better.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. We have a few digital campaigns that we try and promote all of these things, but especially in this community, that's why we're really celebrating and bringing awareness to Hispanic Heritage Month, because we want to make our voices heard and make sure that people hear those statistics and they know that they are not, that they are susceptible as well. Another question here we have for Dr. Correa. Thank you so much for your presentation. Have you noticed a decrease in the incidence of melanoma for younger patients who went through life with more access to better sunscreens? I know that despite so many great sunscreens on the market, I feel people still don't use sunscreen so much.
That is a great question, actually. And I would have to say I'm biased because I work in a cancer center. So obviously I see the ones that have the cancer, right? They come to see me because they already were diagnosed, or I see high risk population. So the ones that didn't have the cancer or haven't been diagnosed, they don't come to me, right? So, but based on that, I would say probably the majority of my population is not young patients. So if we take that as if we extrapolate that, I would say potentially, yes, right? Because the majority of my population is that population that didn't have access to sunblock, right? That being said, I have to say, like you mentioned, a lot of my teenager patients are not as good, okay? I'm not saying all of them. And importantly, like I said before, people do not know about the tanning beds. So it's still, to this date, with all that we know and with all the data we know about tanning beds, that is still like a costume that before going to the prom, you have to go to your tanning bed. So that shouldn't even be there. So even to this day, that's something that people still do, our teenagers do. So we have to get a little bit better in try to promote that. And also, as you know, usually young patients think, oh, this is not going to happen to me, right? I don't care. You can tell them a million times and you're like, I'm invincible. This is not going to happen, right? But like I said, not all of them. Some of them are very careful. Some of them use their sunblock. But I would say probably yes, there's a little bit of decreased incidence, but we still have to be a little bit better in campaigning it.
Absolutely. And, I've heard from some athletes that they don't like to put sunscreen on when they're out on the field because when they sweat, it kind of goes into their eyes and burns. What would you suggest to those people who obviously they're outside, the sun is beating down on them, they should definitely be putting on sunscreen, but they don't want to. So what would you say to those teenagers or those folks?
Sure. So what I usually recommend to them, so it's do some protective clothing and hats, okay? Because for example, I have patients that swim, right? So they're like, I'm not gonna get out of the pool to apply sunblock. That's not feasible, right? So I tell them, well, then wear a shin guard, wear a long sleeve bathing suit. And then you can stay in the water for 2 hours and you're gonna be 100% protected, right? Same goes for the tennis, right? Just wear your long sleeve shirt with your very long sleeves, wear your hat, so you can be playing tennis and you'll be protected. So I think that's a good solution for kind of alternatively to it. And then secondly, if you can, if you're a person that can sometimes adjust the times of your practice, which I know sometimes is not possible because the games and the competitions happen when they happen, right? But if you have the choice of moving your practice, I would say try not to do it between 10 and 3 because 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. because that's when the sun is strongest. So try to do your practice and your outside hours not on that time.
Great. Kind of monitor the times that you're spending outside is a good message.
So here are a few numbers. I think this is probably the one you would like. This one and the next one is the one that have the most numbers. So this one is the one that says that we've had an increased melanoma incidence of 20% among Hispanics in the past 2 decades. So there is an increased incidence of it. They usually present with thicker tumors or they're more commonly presenting with regional involvement when we compare it to white Caucasians. So like I said before, the problem is we don't think because they're not as common, right? In the regular population, the incidence is 28.8 per 100,000. In Hispanics, is roughly 5, right? So it's much less, but it can still present. So the problem is we have the bias that, oh, Hispanics usually don't have it. And that is not true. They can present in Hispanics. But because of this bias, they tend to be larger, thicker, and at a later state. And then the other part that I was saying here, so again, the incidence is lower, right? 1 in 172 for Hispanics and 1 in 38 for whites, but they will be more likely to present with advanced disease and spread to other parts of the body when they are diagnosed. So that's why it's important to have this type of awareness, because we have to, we should know that it still can present in Hispanics. Were those the slides that you want me to share?
Perfect. I want to see if there's any other questions from the audience. And I also want to ask about how do we encourage more screening?
So you're asking me, sorry, or?
Yeah, how would you encourage more Hispanic folks to get screened, to actually make the appointments and come in and get screened?
So that's probably part of the awareness campaign. So the same steps we mentioned before, like doing more talks, more conversations, a little bit more social media campaigns, a little bit more of TV campaigns. I mean, I know Hispanics are big on watching TV versus, I mean, not that they're not on social media, but interesting enough, there is a big following of Hispanics watching regular TV, like cable. So that will be also a good entrance also for them, like even radio, like a lot of Hispanics listen to radio. So, making campaigns that actually tell them melanoma can happen, check yourself every month. If you see anything out of usual, seek help, etc.
Great. These are some great ideas, and definitely something for us all to think about as we enter into Hispanic Awareness Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, and throughout the whole year, not just during this month, but definitely something that we should be aware of every day. So I want to thank you both. I want to see if you have any other final thoughts, Jose or Dr. Correa, that you'd like to share before we close up this evening.
Just check you out every time you can. If you have a wife, she can, check you way better. If you don't, well, get the mirror and, look at yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo Jose for sure. Check yourself at least once a month, and be aware that melanoma can still present in Hispanic populations. And I just want to thank the Melanoma Research Foundation for this great webinar.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you both. We appreciate all that you do for the melanoma community and appreciate you taking the additional time to be with us this evening. Thanks again to ISI for their generous support of our Ask the Expert webinar series. Again, this program will be available on demand on our learning platform. Also, it'll be streamed to our social media channels at a later day. And at the end of the program this evening, there will be an evaluation that will pop up in your browser. Please do fill that out and provide us with feedback on today's session. It's so very important to the work that we do. And please visit melanoma.org to learn more about our upcoming webinars and other educational or advocacy opportunities. We also have a specific all in Spanish website, ustedymelanoma.org. Please check that out. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at education@melanoma.org. Thank you all so much for joining us.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.